Sybil Ruth is a writer and editor who until last year was working for a literary consultancy as one of its core editors, but the work started to dry up after a member of staff took objection to some comments that Sybil had made on Twitter. She took the company to court and has now received an apology and a substantial settlement. And please welcome Sybil Ruth. So, Sybil, you've been on the show before. Welcome back. And of course, the last time you were on, it was all up in the air. We didn't know where this was going to go. But for the people who are watching at home who didn't see that previous interview, could you explain what is it you'd done on Twitter that had so upset members of staff?
Well, nothing terrible, which was what was so odd about it. I am what is called a gender-critical feminist, which means that I believe human beings come in two varieties, male, female, that you can't actually switch from one category to the other, much though you would like to, and that also it's problematic when there was a decision to consult about reforming the Gender Recognition Act, because if it's very easy for people to change sex, they may be unhappy in the sort of sex they are, but to change and to then be able to inhabit women's spaces, take places in women's sport, go into female prisons, these things all strike me as potentially causing harm to women. And
we've talked a lot about these sorts of issues on the show, the necessity for single-sex spaces when it comes to preserving women's rights. So you'd made this comment about a trans individual with facial hair.
Yeah, I had no idea who this person was, but somebody who I'm friends with on Twitter had posted a photograph. And I think what was quite striking is that they'd got very, very, heavy facial hair.
Yes.
But in other ways had transformed themselves or to try and aim for a much more feminine appearance.
So in terms of clothing and hairstyle and that
pink
kind of
jacket, lipstick, waved hair, handbag with the gold chain.
Yes.
And it was, I think what I objected to is the idea that being a woman is just a costume. You can put on these props and then automatically that you can use that to say, I'm now identifying as, I'm inhabiting my female identity today, welcome me into your spaces, accept me as a woman. And not everybody wants to, and for some women that will be threatening and difficult.
Well, I mean, as some feminists who've been on the show have said, if an individual comes into the female toilets with a full beard, that can be an intimidating thing.
Yes, absolutely. There can be third spaces, or I accept that some people, if they feel that they are happier acting as though they were a woman, that could lead to them feeling as if they might get attention they didn't want and they go into the gents. But then I think that it's basically who's feeling uncomfortable matters most.
Yes,
a man feeling slightly awkward, or women who have experienced rape and sexual violence, or simply just do not know what the intentions of this person might be.
Course.
But, this was all perhaps at the back of my mind. So I made a single tweet which said nightmare, because I, was reflecting on the fact that a lot of single-sex spaces used to be respected. They no longer are. And then I qualified it because, obviously, for example, if you felt more comfortable doing this show wearing a sarong, that would be absolutely fine. I respect your right. I expect everybody's right to just try and express themselves in a way that doesn't harm other people.
Yes.
But really, that was it.
But also, you'd made the point that when women have facial hair, they are attacked for it. And,
yes.
And yet, in this case, this seemed to be something to be celebrated.
I think it really shows how binary the way we look at life is. And even if we want to be very cool and alternative and say people come in all sorts of varieties, that the double standard is really clear, that women are, if you step too far out of line as a woman, people will feel they're very entitled to comment, her hair's not good, her makeup isn't good, I wouldn't wear that dress,
yes,
she's put on weight.
A lot of comments about physical appearance against women on social media.
Yes, I think it's something that's undoubtedly got worse. Whereas I think if men want to assume a more female way of presenting themselves, everybody just says, how brave, how stunning, and And I think that means that they're not fooled. They actually know it's a bloke. And it's very much an Emperor's New Clothes situation.
Yes.
That the people who are more powerful in society, they're the ones who get kind of flattered and appeased. And women who, by and large, are less powerful, they are more likely to be, get sort of feedback, keep in line.
Yes.
If you're not trying really, really hard, we're just going to kind of make you feel a bit insecure. We're going to kind of keep you feeling anxious.
So these were the views that you'd expressed, all of which are, well, firstly, when you're talking about the immutable nature of sex, that's a matter of scientific fact. So that's not even really a belief. But even so, since the Maya Postata case, this is all protected in law anyway.
Yes.
So what happened? When did you first notice that the consultancy you were working for had reacted?
I didn't notice straight away. What happened is that I was working on a particular project. I was just starting work, and they contacted me to say, can you hold off? Can you not do it? And I just felt there'd been some mix-up at head office, that there's a process of matching editors and authors, and that for some reason they'd kind of done a mismatch.
Yes.
And so I didn't think anything of it. An email was then sent round rather later to all editors saying we reserve the right to get rid of anybody whose behaviour is not in accord with our values. We take equal opportunities, equality, diversity and inclusion very, very seriously.
This didn't name you specifically?
No, it was a generic email.
Yes.
But it talked about they reserved the right to get rid of anybody who wasn't in accord with their, didn't behave in accordance with their values.
Yes.
And it felt a bit uncomfortable, shall we say.
Yes.
We were supposed to be brand ambassadors, and
you were dropped. You'd just been dropped from this without an explanation.
No, that's correct, that I was dropped. And then there was this rather sort of kind of email that it didn't sound very friendly. It was a bit like, shape up. And I suppose for an organisation which has a lot of editors working, we're not all going to have precisely the same values anyway.
Well, I was going to ask about that, because if they're saying that this company has a certain set of values that you have to abide by in order to work for them, isn't that a kind of imposition on all of the members of staff, saying you've got to be aligned on everything we think?
Yeah, and it was also never made clear when I joined the company. They simply asked about my editorial skills, and I
how
told them about
the job, right?
Yes,
yeah.
I told them about my previous experience, and I felt that was what was important. And it's part of the job that you treat every client with civility and with courtesy and so on. So I felt it was worth debating with them. Sort of saying, well, of course I will treat all clients with courtesy and with respect. But I'm concerned by the idea that anybody who, for example, posts something that is judged to be hateful on social media, that would automatically mean that you weren't employed by the company. Because I think hatred now is interpreted very, very broadly, and it can simply mean something that people profoundly disagree with or don't particularly like.
Yes.
And I think it's particularly important for writers, which and I write as well as edit, to be able to explore ideas very, very freely, and to sometimes write and say things which might make people feel uncomfortable. And we're editors, but we're also human beings. I'm very, aware of all sorts of political issues, and I would like to be able to express my opinion, and my lawful opinions in my spare time.
So really this is about free speech. This is not specifically about gender-critical feminism, although that is obviously part of it.
Yeah.
But actually, when it comes to a firm like this, preventing its staff from expressing their own views in their own time, in their own spaces, on their own social media accounts...
Absolutely.
...then that's quite dangerous precedent, isn't
and
it?
I think women's speech tends to be policed particularly tightly, because there is an idea that as women we should always be kind. We should never cause offence to anybody. And if we cause offence to people, then we are bad women.
Right.
And we must have to be put, in a special box.
Yes, I understand.
So
you've won this. Well, this was before tribunal. There's a settlement has been reached. That would suggest that. Well, it's gone your way, hasn't it? Which is great.
Yes, I mean, I received an apology. It was acknowledged that my beliefs, while not necessarily shared by the company, were certainly worthy of respect in a democratic society.
Yes.
And you could argue, I mean, I'm so happy to have got to that point. And I must say, big thanks to the Free Speech Union I must say thanks to GB News, because when I was on the show before, I had a kind of terrific response and a lot of support from people. But I guess, you know, in a way, it's a model of what should happen, in the sense that there's a problem, people disagree, you explore the areas of common ground, you acknowledge the fact that you will differ in some respects, an apology is made, and then everybody can move on and go forwards. I think what is so difficult for women, and also for men who have problems of this kind, and it particularly affects people in what's called precarious employment, because, you know, often you're very scared. You're perhaps more easy to get rid of if you're freelance.
Of course.
You're an
not
agency
a permanent
worker.
Contract or anything.
Yeah. So I think people tend to keep their heads down. But it does take a long time, this process. When I've described, you know, people talking, people agreeing to differ, people moving on, it should maybe take a few days or a week. It took 15 months, and
wow.
FSU, ACAS, two solicitors, one barrister,
yes.
The tribunal service, one employment judge who did a case management hearing. And you think, I just did a couple of tweets where I sort of said, you know, this guy's wearing stubble. He's not a real woman. And
15 months for this is incredible. And, you know, like you say, Free Speech Union does an amazing job with sticking up for these people. Yes. But like you imply, it shouldn't be necessary, should it? We should be able to have conversations, disagree. Yeah. That's what a civilised free society is all about. I mean, and I was lucky. I mean, I was lucky to be able to, in a sense, despite the fact it was a very difficult and it was a very stressful process, lots of women and some men, you know, they can't take the risk because the mortgage was paid off, because I got a supportive partner, the kids were grown up. I could take the risk. I could stick my neck out because, and I didn't really feel I could do anything else. But I mean, I think everybody ought to stick up for their rights, but I can understand why some people have to sadly take the decision. I'm not going to be able to speak freely at work. I'm not even going to be able to speak freely on social media. And I was really upset to hear about the case of Roisin Murphy, because, I mean, she thought she was speaking to her friends on a private Facebook group chat, and somebody snitched on her. It's like the Stasi. So Absolutely.
And I think,
well, I think your case is going to help in that regard.
I really hope so. I really hope it helps to create a climate where, in the arts, in people with precarious contracts, that people will realise that people are entitled to their opinions, and as long as they express them in a lawful way, particularly in their private life and at home, that they should just be able to get on and do it without having to go through 15 months of legal negotiation.
Absolutely. Well, Sybil Ruth, thank you ever so much for coming to the show and talking to us about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.